What's going on, Aquashella Dallas? My name is Tanner and I run the Serpa Design YouTube channel. I'm a lifelong animal enthusiast who's been working with exotic animals like frogs, snakes, and fish since roughly the age of 6. I'm 31 now, so it's well over 2 decades in this limitless medium. I've learned a lot over the years through research and thousands of hours working hands-on in the craft. My goal is to make things as accessible, beautiful, and easily maintained as possible while continuing to push the medium forward. As a result, I do aquariums differently, and today I'll show you how I do exactly that. I usually like to begin with the hardscape or framework. If you can get that looking good, then the rest will follow. I sifted through my personal collection in the Scape Dojo to see what I had to work with. I generally like to begin with the largest piece, which I use as a key element or object that dictates the placement of other items. I knew I wanted a wood-focused design, but there wasn't anything viable in the drawers. That's when I remembered about this pile in the corner of the animal room. A few of these are closer to what I had in mind. Seeing them in the tank changes everything though. I didn't care for this one at all. However, I want to point out what I did here. I was doing a maintenance check with my hand. If it can comfortably fit between the hardscape and glass, then maintenance should be easily performed. Anyway, as I continued, I thought this was a possible link up, but despite my best efforts, it just wasn't working. However, as soon as I swapped this one, I knew this was the answer. I'll use these logs as the key element or foundation to build from with various details and techniques. Mixing driftwood species is often frowned upon, but if done correctly, I think it looks great. Utilizing something like spiderwood, for example, is one of my go-tos for getting crazy detail with minimal effort, and thus a more dynamic layout. For this scape, I loosely followed the direction of the features within the main branches. That said, I focused primarily on the upright direction. Also, don't be afraid to break pieces to get a better fit. Just keep in mind, it can't be undone. Placing elements can also get kinda tricky if they don't want to stay. I'll resort to whatever I can find in the room, like this deli cup. Another aspect to how I scape is that I rarely know what it will look like from the start. I just go into it with a general idea and let the materials do the rest of the work. Again, this is a matter of matching characteristics across elements, like directionality or texture, to create something that appears cohesive. So in the case of this scape and most others that I do, I had to dismantle it when I had a good foundation. I personally like to attach my scapes together with things like expanding foam, epoxy, or superglue. They're inert once cured, so they're completely safe for livestock. Attaching pieces together makes it easier to create structures that otherwise couldn't exist. Maintenance is easier as well because you don't have to worry about things moving. When applying foam, I try to make it as inconspicuous as possible, but excess can be easily remedied later on, so don't worry about making a mess. For this one to work, I need some stones, more specifically, lava rock. They're lightweight, and because the driftwood will create a lot of texture, using something subtle will allow it to remain the focus. I placed them in areas I found lacking, foaming them in as I did. Once they're attached, there's really no going back, so I did my best to recreate a more defined version of the scape I did before. Using foam for everything is possible, but sometimes you need a little more precision, and aquarium epoxy is perfect for that. Pressing it between joints has the same effect, but it takes longer to cure and isn't as flexible, so breaking the bond is easier. After applying it, I let everything sit overnight for stability, so I could work outside of the tank, which made things much easier. I also scraped off excess foam. I'll be applying more, but I don't want it sticking to the table, so I lined it with parchment paper. As I continued scaping, it was more of the same. Place elements, foam them in, and rip off excess as it cures. Eventually I had to put it back in the tank to ensure everything looked good. It did, but there could be more room in the back. No worries, that's why we have tools. That helped. However, I noticed an error. I didn't check the front well enough, and it no longer passed the maintenance check. I broke it down with pliers and we were good to go. It continued to unfold from there, but when it was nearly complete, I couldn't help but feel like something was missing right around here. I cut a branch off another piece to work in. That's when I got a different idea. Instead, I tried to attach the tip to these pieces. This could have worked, but I thought a straight piece looked better. I improvised a little, drilling a hole in both surfaces, and used a segment of a bamboo dowel to loosely hold them together. Foam bridged the gap and added stability. It could have passed like this, but I knew it would have looked better with more details. Unfortunately, I had nothing else to work with in the dojo. However, I'm still letting the tannins run their course in the firewood scape, so I figured I'd take these branches and replace them later. Anyway, I wove them in much like I did before, which more or less completed the base layout. Securing these fine details is easiest with super glue and something like sand, rock dust, or what I'll use here, cocoa fiber. These cause the glue to dry immediately while creating a strong, seamless bond. After using this technique on the branches and to hide excess foam, the scape was complete. We're going to take this one above the rim with a water line right around here. With all these branches, there's an opportunity to add a unique feature with the use of wicking fabric. Having only part of it in the water can extend the surface far beyond and directly up the branches. I simply zip tied it around them. However, the 14 hours of work I just put into making this would be useless if it floated. The larger pieces of wood are pretty dense, so I didn't expect it to. It had different ideas though. Luckily I had slate on hand just in case this happened, and it was heavy enough to keep it submerged. I just had to drill some holes and attach it from underneath with stainless steel screws. I put it outside to dry while I prepped the packaging because time was running out. This would be the last time I'd see it for a few days, and almost $200 later to ship. You didn't think I'd go through all that trouble just to have you watch some video at Aquashella, did you?
No, I did not. I kind of wanted to pull a tarp off, and you wouldn't know this was here, but things don't always turn out the way that we plan. But I wanted to do a video to explain everything I did up to this point, because the way that I scape is it's not a quick process, right? Like I said in the video, it took me about 14 hours to make this scape. I tried to make something very, unique with a lot of movement and something that really draws you in. And I think it's definitely my style. However, you'll notice that since the video, we have some moss here and tillandsia or air plants already attached to it. I intended initially to do that off on stage right now, but just with time constraints and everything, we had to do all of that ahead of time because it probably took us about 2 hours to finish that up. And I want this tank to be perfect for whoever is taking it home, which is going to be one of you. So with that in mind, we're going to set this thing up. And also, a row of broken. UPS wasn't very kind to the package. It was in several pieces. But whenever I do the video next week on this, you'll see that whole process. But anyway, from here, there's really not that much else to do other than take care of plants and then just add the detail work. With a potted aquarium, ideally, you want some sort of soil substrate, right? You'll see out there that people use aqua soil, which are these little pellets that go in. They're highly nutritious and that sort of thing. Other people use topsoil and put sand or gravel over top of it. That's cool too. But me personally, what I've been doing lately is I get these mesh bags that is similar to what a chemical filtration media would come in, so none of the finer particles would come out, but it's a mixture of topsoil, aqua soil, sand, and gravel. I find that the combination of all those elements works really well together in maintaining the root structure. But I like to do it that way because say you have aqua soil down in the bottom and you cap it with sand, inevitably it all migrates to the surface and it makes this soupy mess that's really ugly to keep. And like myself, anybody who's in here, I would wager that the vast majority of you have MTS, multiple tank syndrome. And so maintenance is something that you're considering, right? And I don't want to be maintaining my tanks very long. I want them to just kind of work and maintain the aesthetic. And that's one of the ways that I do it. So with this tank, I'm not envisioning a lot of aquatic plants. So I just have a few bags here. And realistically, I think I'm just going to use one of them. And I want it right back in here, and I apologize if the view of the tank's not that great. It's small, obviously, but the other thing that I really like to incorporate, and I think it's kind of one of the signature things of a Serpa design tank, is I include terrestrial plants coming up out of the top. I have a whole video about that on my channel, which explains it in extreme detail, and I think it's the best comprehensive thing about that. But the reason I bring that up is that I have all of these house plants here, which I prepared ahead of time at my house. I cut them all down to the bare roots and I tied them in sphagnum moss just so that they retain the moisture. If you can keep the roots wet, they will survive. But with this tank, the way I set it up, all the hardscape here, I can simply wedge these in between the branches like so, and they'll survive just fine. Other times you might not have that luxury, or you like you just need a different means to house the plants, or if you have monster fish, so you don't really have much of a hardscape, but you want the plants coming out of the top. Good option are these baskets. And I'm actually gonna pass these around, so here, if you want to check that out. You can just find them on Amazon. They're called like aquarium baskets or something. I don't know. That you'll find them though. They're easy to find. So for me though, I'm always thinking of the aesthetics and everything. And although you could hide that behind driftwood and rocks and that sort of thing, something like this is a little more seamless. And typically I also wouldn't have the sphagnum moss around the roots like this, but just for the sake of this tank and being able to preserve it for somebody to take with them, I wanted to do it. And it could stay on them, but the only thing is it will acidify the water slightly. So if you're keeping a betta or something of that nature, they'll do perfectly fine in there. But if African cichlid or something that likes harder water, obviously wouldn't be ideal. But I don't really think this is a proper cichlid aquascape anyway, so you're not really too concerned about that. But these larger plants, and similar to how I did the scape earlier, where I start out with the largest elements and work down, I typically like to work with the bigger items, and these syngonium are a perfect option for that. I'm sure that as you have seen people set up aquariums and put plants coming up out at the top, you always see people using pothos. It's kind of like the go-to, right? I actually personally think it's one of the worst plants for this application because it doesn't stay in the tank, right? If you want a 50-foot vine going up into your house and whatever, like, it's perfectly fine, but I like to use plants that grow more upright and mound. But if you'll notice the way that these are, they have a big leaf to them, right? Adding in different textures, different leaf structures, and that sort of thing really takes the look to the next level. And a very easy thing to want to do is add a bunch of color, right? So a lot of red plants, a lot of orange plants, and that sort of thing. But it looks kind of odd, and it's just not natural. It's not something that you see in nature. So I find that keeping as many of the plants green as possible is the way to go. And so in this instance, I have mostly green plants. I have some ferns here, rabbit's foot ferns, and they're pretty cool because they grow on a little fuzzy rhizome like this. And these will happily grow up and around and up this wicking fabric as they grow, right? The only thing, though, is only the roots can be under the water. And that's the thing with most of these plants, right? The roots are the only thing that you want under the water. But I think something like this, I can't see it from the front, obviously, but I'd imagine something like that looks pretty viable. And just having this differentiation in texture, you know, the fine fronds on the ferns mixed with the bigger leaves on the syngonium, it creates an interesting look. And similar to like what I said about the hardscape, right? Like you have the bigger branches with the smaller branches, and it makes a more aesthetic look. And the more you can kind of play off that texture thing, I think it really helps. I have a Hemigraphis raponda here, or dragon's tongue. This is a cool one because it has these purple leaves on it, and once it gets established, it goes perfectly well. And something else I should add is that other than the syngonium, all of these plants are animal safe, like house, like cats or that sort of thing. You know, if they eat the plants, they won't get sick when they eat them. But I try it. Like, I don't have cats. I'm allergic to them, so I don't really have to worry about that. But I know that for some people, that's a concern. What do you think? Does that look good? Good enough. Okay. Could I get an assistant up here? Is there anyone that wants to come up and help me? Yeah, here, you can come up too, yeah. Okay, so have you ever planted tanks before? Have you worked with Anubias? Okay, so Anubias, whenever it's shipped, right, it comes on this raw cool stuff typically. You can get it bare root sometimes. But whenever you plant it, you want to pull that off before you plant it. So if you guys could, here, if you want to come over here and just set separate it out for me. Have you done this before?
Yeah.
I know you have you? What's your name, by the way? What's your name? Jack. Have you done this before?
No.
No? Okay. You're doing a good job. So while they do that, I have a whole bag of Anubias here, and I wanted to keep it simple as far as the plants go. I have it set up obviously for stem plants because I put that substrate back in here, but for the sake of time and transportation and stuff, those plants would wither and they wouldn't do too well. So having it mostly in epiphyte focused tank, I think is the way to go. And as I am sorry, the microphone keeps cutting out. As I'm adding these, right, there are spots in the scape that might look natural, right? So some of these joints up in here, they look a little silly. And when I make this scape, I understand that I'm going to be putting plants and that sort of thing in it, right? So I understand, okay, it doesn't need to be perfect. I can fix it later with plants. So with these, I just kind of pepper them in spots that I think look pretty cool. And with any of these rhizomal plants like Ubius, Bucephalandra, or whatever, a lot of people say, oh, you can't grow them in substrate and that type of thing. You can, but only the roots that you see on there can go in. The rhizome, which is a horizontal green, in this case it's green, structure that the leaves come up out of, that has to remain above the substrate. But these plants do really well, and as I mentioned before, epiphytes or epiphytic, they're plants that don't need a substrate to grow, and they probably grow better that way. So you can just literally wedge them in between crevices of the scape, and they do quite well. But I'd imagine time is running out, so if I could get another assistant to help me plant some of these, that would be cool. NASA, are you guys good? How's it coming out? You got that rock wall off good? Right on. Right on. So a lot of times when the plants come, they're huge like this, right? You don't need a plant that big. So a lot of times oh, no, here. We don't need that. These split, right? You can split them. Let me see. You want to try to split it? See how it has a little give there in the middle if you just pull them apart? Perfect. So if you see it will happen several more times, they just kind of easily pull apart. And I think it works best if the roots are around a half an inch long to plant them. So we have all these roots here, right? I don't want that. Rip them off. And it will plant easy. And let's see. This look good. All right. You guys are good. Thank you so much. Give them a round of applause. All right, and you, sir, I apologize. What's your name? Samuel? All right, let's get to work, man. So pretty much if you can just like see how I have these caves here? I like that look, so retain those, kind of stuff them in here. Yeah, around here, anywhere you look. I mean, I can come back and if I don't like it, we can change it. But we got a lot of Anubias to work with, so see what you can do with that. Another thing is whenever you're making these scapes, things can dry out very easily. The plants are typically grown in water or in a greenhouse type of environment where there's a lot of humidity. We got a sprayer here, so I'm constantly just spraying things down, keeping them all moist, and they're looking good. And it's as simple as that. Now, another thing about aquascaping, which I think you see a lot, which I personally don't care for, I think it's more of a preference thing, but I think it looks odd when we see a lot of these scapes out there where it's these really intricate dark stones and stuff, and then throw white sand in it because we need all this contrast, right? You don't see that in nature typically. I assume that there's some outlying circumstances where you see that, and I realize this scape isn't natural. Like, you're probably not going to see something that looks exactly like that, but it's inspiration is derived from it, right? I could have went a few directions here. I think white sand, obviously it would look good, but I think that just the contrast of it and stuff looks unnatural. So I typically like to go more natural colored sand, like a brown or sometimes black. Here I went with brown because I thought it would tie into the cocoa fiber. Apologize if I keep pausing to speak. I'm not typically in these much of social scenarios, so I'm kind of gassed out. My voice is going, but bear with me. We got all this sand here, and how's it looking? Good? Yeah, I'll come around. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Only thing though, and I don't know how well you guys can see it from out here, but the way he has this one situated, I like the way you have it pointed in this direction, and it looks pretty cool. But the way the roots are, I always try to hide them to the best of my ability. Like, obviously, you can only do it so well, but like hide those. You might even be able to stick another one like in the back here. Yeah, and I would say also get some under to this here. But as you see, like as soon as he starts adding all of these Anubias in here, it just brings the scape to life. It makes all the transitions from the rocks into the stone a lot more seamless and, as I keep saying, natural looking. Obviously, it's not natural, but it has the essence of that, right? And I like to do, like to. This is not usually work. Okay. Yeah, we're making good time. We're making good time. Okay. But whenever I'm scaping these tanks, I typically like to do as much of the hardscape, the planting, all these things before I add the substrate, because inevitably it's gonna get somewhat dirty during construction. But it makes it easier if you do all of that, then you add the sand, and you only got to do a little bit of water change typically, right? So I'll start with fine grained sand. It's natural, and you'll see as soon as one thing that I forgot to mention real quick is this white egg crate stuff down here. Any of you who've watched my videos are familiar with it, I'm sure. But when you use all these heavy rocks and things in a tank, you can get away with putting them directly on the glass sometimes. But if they have any points or jagged edges or anything like that, and they're just driving down into the glass, it's probably going to cause it to crack. And I don't have that here for this purpose, but if you see the plate that I put on it and then I drilled it from underneath, those screws could create a pressure point. And I don't really think we want to break a $400 or $500 tank, however much that was. And on that, I know that aquascaping and stuff, it's often perceived as very expensive, and a high-end scape like this, the scape itself didn't really cost that much, but all the equipment, like the lighting and the tank and whatever, it you know, all in this is probably $1,000 tank. But if you watch my videos and stuff, I usually do those tanks for under $200 because I'm building everything from scratch or using hand-me-down tanks and stuff. And aquascaping does not need to be expensive. And realistically, this is nicer than most of the tanks I have at my house. I just wanted to go all out since I'm giving it away to one of you guys. I wanted to do something special to kind of give back for the support that I've had over the years and make it nice. You're good. You don't need, yeah, I appreciate you. No, it's cool. I just kind of get in the zone. I'm just like getting to it. So, anyway, though, yeah, sorry. Give him a round of applause. Yeah, typically when I'm working, I'm just kind of in the zone in my room with my headphones on, just trying to focus on what I'm doing. So, you know. But yeah, like I said, as soon as you start adding this substrate, it brings the whole thing together. And we'll do something here in a second that will make it look even better. But let me finish adding this substrate. So another thing, like I mentioned in the video, obviously, that I've been doing this for so long, and over the course of 20 some years or however long it's been that I've made tanks and scaped and worked with animals and so on and so forth, right? I don't come from a wealthy background or anything like that. Like my family's middle class or whatever, right? Pretty average. But I just built this up over a course of time through passion, through perseverance, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Literally, I almost cut my finger off 2 years ago. So, there's no shortage of that sort of thing. But I bring all of this up, and the point that I say it really is like, if you have a passion, you have an interest of something that you want to strive for and everything. I know it's like cheesy and cliche, but like, if you just put your all into it and are genuine with your passion, like the fruits of your labor will come. And the only reason that I'm here today doing this and speaking all this stuff, it's like, determination, passion, and I put in all the work, obviously, and all that sort of thing. But, I give a lot of the credit to God, obviously. Like, I feel like he blessed my life and just took me to places that I've never imagined being. Like, I'm just some goofball from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I never thought I'd be up here showing you guys how to make these tanks and stuff. So, I just want to say I appreciate you all so much and giving me the opportunity to speak here and show you about all this today. So yeah, I mean, we're pretty much there with this. The only other thing that I think it needs, which I have over here, are these tiny little rocks, right? And they're little black rocks. They tie into the rest of the hardscape here, right? And when you sprinkle these within the sand and stuff, it really just helps tie it all together and make the look a little more seamless. I think I'm going to do my best to get this as dialed in during the talk, but if I got to adjust things a little bit afterwards, I hope that's okay with you guys, or one of you, I guess. Is that dope? What do you think? Does it look right? All right. Let me take. Sorry. Um, it helps to really look back. Like, I haven't been back here, obviously, seeing this view, but you can, which this might sound weird. It's something that I learned in design school, but if you squint when you look at stuff like a design like this, right? If you squint at it and just look at the blurry colors and stuff, it can help you see the composition better than if you're seeing all of the detail. I have bad eyes, and if I'm not wearing my contacts, it's just naturally like that, right? So if I look at, I have them in now, but if I do that, it's like I kind of naturally in that state. So if you blink and look at it, in this area here, I think it looks pretty cohesive, right? But it's missing stuff over in here, a little bit of the Nubius. I think some of those pops of green will help tie it all together, right? So probably around here, I think will look pretty cool. And keep in mind, all this stuff is subjective. It's all art. Some people might think something looks cool that I don't, or vice versa. And everything is subject to change, and also it's nature, right? When you set these things up, the plants on a mind of their own, the fish have a mind of their own, and it will take on a life of its own. And yeah, you can control to some extent and put things in motion to get a certain outcome, but there's always some element of it that's out of your control, whether good or bad. And I feel like that looks a little bit better, but maybe it needs something right in here. And I feel like that looks better, but now, which obviously I did it kind of quick, I feel like this all up in here looks a little silly. You just have this mass of plants that are all the same, and I feel like it looks kind of weird. So let's pull this one out of here and get one of the ferns in here for more texture. I think I'm probably running out of time here, unfortunately. But you can't rush art. That's how it goes, right? So I think we'll leave it like this for now, and I'll dial things in after the fact. My question to you is, how many of you in the audience would want, like, are able to take this tank home either today or tomorrow? Like, you live in that, like, if you live nearby and you have the means to take it home, right? Because obviously it can't be shipped or flown. Trying to think of the best way to do this. Who has the planter things that I passed around? You two? Are you guys able to take the tank home? You guys got a Rochambeau. You got a rock, paper, scissors. Let's go. Yeah, let's go. You guys got to come up. People got to see. Okay. What's your name? Marcy here. Cindy? Cindy? Okay. 3 out of 5. First to win 3. All right. One down. All right. Paper. Even Steven. Oh. Oh, man. You can't make this stuff up as if you try. It's 2-2. Let's go. Oh.